You think you know about serial killers, right? Think again. Israel Keyes admitted to murders, but here's the catch. He wouldn't say how many. Some killers crave fame, but Keyes? He wanted his secrets to die with him. Chilling, right? Keyes wasn't your typical monster lurking in the shadows. He was a construction worker, a family man, blending in seamlessly. He was hiding in plain sight, and that's what made him so terrifyingly effective. He was like a ghost, drifting across the country, leaving a trail of pain and unanswered questions. He was meticulous, organized, and utterly ruthless. Buckle up because this is one story you won't forget. Israel Keyes wasn't some creepy loner. He didn't fit the stereotype we all imagine when we think of a monster hiding in plain sight. There was nothing about his appearance or his mannerisms that would set off alarm bells. He was the kind of guy you'd pass on the street and forget a moment later, a face lost in the crowd, a neighbor you'd wave to without a second thought. This guy ran a construction business in Alaska, blending right in with the rugged, hard-working folks around him. He was the type to show up early, put in a full day's work, and crack a joke with his crew before heading home. He drove a plain white work van, the kind you see everywhere, and nobody ever gave it a second glance. To his clients and co-workers, he was just another reliable tradesman, someone you could trust to get the job done. He had a girlfriend, even a daughter. On weekends you might spot him at the park, pushing his little girl on the swings, or sharing a quiet moment with his partner. He played the role of a loving father and a devoted boyfriend, attending school events and family gatherings like any other parent. To the outside world, he was building a life, not hiding a secret. That's the thing about monsters. They wear ordinary faces. They don't always lurk in the shadows or stand out in a crowd. Sometimes they're the ones who blend in best, who know exactly how to mimic normalcy. Keyes was a master of this disguise, slipping through life unnoticed, his true nature hidden behind a mask of everyday routine. Imagine living next door to this guy, sharing a beer at a barbecue, completely oblivious. You might have borrowed a tool from him or chatted about the weather over the fence. Maybe your kids played together, or you exchanged holiday cards. He was the kind of neighbor who seemed safe, approachable, even friendly. No one would ever suspect that beneath that unremarkable exterior something far more sinister was brewing. Keyes was living a double life, and he played the part perfectly. By day, he was the dependable worker, the family man, the friend. He knew how to put people at ease, how to earn their trust. He was careful, methodical, never drawing attention to himself. Every interaction was calculated, every smile rehearsed. He built a wall of normalcy around himself and no one ever thought to look behind it. It's enough to make you question everyone you meet, you know? How well do we really know the people around us? The truth is, most of us take comfort in the familiar, in the belief that evil is easy to spot. But Keyes shattered that illusion. He reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the most ordinary. But behind the charming facade, a dark mind was scheming. While he smiled and shook hands, he was already planning his next move, mapping out the details with chilling precision. His thoughts were a world away from the life he presented to everyone else. He thrived on secrecy, on the thrill of knowing he could fool everyone around him. Keyes wasn't driven by the usual demons, no twisted fantasies, no specific victim profile. He didn't fit the patterns investigators look for. There was no clear motive, no obvious warning signs. He was a predator who chose his victims at random, making him nearly impossible to predict or track. His crimes were about control, about proving to himself that he could outsmart everyone. He simply enjoyed the thrill of the hunt, the power over life and death. For Keyes, it was never about rage or revenge, it was about the game, the secret life he led right under everyone's noses. And that's what makes his story so terrifying, the realization that true evil can hide behind the most unremarkable facade. Keyes didn't stick to one city, not this guy. He was a true drifter, a shadow slipping through the cracks of America's vast landscape. While most serial killers operate within a comfort zone, a familiar neighborhood or city, Keyes shattered that mold completely. He was a ghost on the move, never staying in one place long enough to draw suspicion, always blending in with the crowd. His ability to disappear into the background made him nearly invisible to law enforcement and the communities he haunted. He traveled across the United States like he was on vacation, but his journeys were far from innocent. Each trip was meticulously planned, every route chosen with care. He left a trail of hidden kill kits buried across the country, secret caches of terror, waiting patiently for the day he'd return. These weren't random stops. Each location was scouted, each kit placed with chilling precision. Imagine the sheer scale of it, a network of death, stretching from coast to coast, all orchestrated by one man. Talk about being organized, right? These weren't your average suitcases or travel bags. Keyes approached his crimes with the mind of a meticulous planner, almost like a project manager of evil. He kept detailed notes, lists, and inventories, making sure every tool and weapon was accounted for. His storage spaces were immaculate, his gear always ready to go at a moment's notice. It's the kind of organization you'd expect from a professional, not a killer. We're talking weapons, shovels, even buckets of quick-drying cement. Each kit was a grim toolkit, containing everything he'd need to abduct, kill, and dispose of a victim without leaving a trace. There were guns, knives, ropes, and even bottles of Drano for destroying evidence, shovels for digging graves, cement for hiding bodies. Nothing was left to chance. He thought of every detail, every possible scenario, and prepared for it. He was prepared for anything, always one step ahead. Before each trip, he'd research local police activity, study maps, and even monitor the news to avoid detection. He'd pack his bags with the same care as a soldier heading into battle, double-checking every item, rehearsing his moves in his mind. His confidence came from this preparation. He believed he was untouchable, and for a long time he was. It's enough to give you nightmares about that dusty old suitcase in your attic. Imagine stumbling across one of his forgotten kits, years after it was hidden, and realizing the horror it was meant to unleash. These weren't just tools, they were time bombs, waiting for the right moment to be unearthed. The thought that something so sinister could be lurking, undetected in the most ordinary places is truly chilling. He'd fly somewhere, rent a car, then drive for hours, picking up victims along the way. His travel patterns were erratic, designed to confuse anyone who might try to follow his trail. Sometimes he'd drive hundreds of miles out of his way just to throw off investigators. He used cash, avoided surveillance, and never left a digital footprint. Every move was calculated, every decision made with cold, ruthless logic. No rhyme or reason, just pure calculated chaos. To outsiders, his crimes seemed random, but in reality, they were the result of careful planning and a deep understanding of how to exploit the system. He thrived on unpredictability, making it nearly impossible for law enforcement to connect the dots. His methods were a masterclass in misdirection, a web of confusion spun across the country. It was like he was playing a game, and we were all pawns in his twisted game of death. Every move was deliberate, every action part of a larger strategy. In the end, Keyes wasn't just a killer, he was a strategist, a manipulator, and a master of calculated chaos. The terrifying part? For years, no one even realized they were playing. Keyes was a master of disappearing acts, both his own and his victims. He'd snatch people from parks, trailheads, even their own homes, leaving no trace. It was like they vanished into thin air. Imagine the terror those poor souls felt, realizing they were trapped with this monster. He'd often torture them for days, prolonging their agony before finally ending their lives. He'd dispose of the bodies hundreds of miles away, burying them in remote locations or dumping them in rivers and lakes. It's enough to make you think twice about that solo hike in the woods, right? Here's the thing about Keyes, there was no type. Young, old, male, female, he didn't discriminate. He'd kill just because he could, and honestly, that made him even more terrifying. It's kind of like trying to predict lightning strikes. Imagine being an investigator on this case. Talk about a nightmare. No connections, no motives, no witnesses. It was like chasing a phantom, a whisper in the wind. The randomness of it all sent chills down everyone's spines. It meant that anyone, anywhere, could be his next target. It was a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind the most ordinary faces. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Humor? In a story like this? Look, I'm not making light of the victims, not at all. But even in the darkest of times, sometimes you gotta find a way to cope, you know? Like, the cops found one of his kill kits buried in a park. Inside, a handwritten to-do list. Number 1 on the list, dig hole. I mean, come on, you gotta laugh to keep from crying, right? It's a defense mechanism, a way to deal with the unimaginable. Because if we don't laugh, we'll just be left with the horror, and that's no way to live. After years of evading law enforcement and leaving a trail of devastation across the country, Israel Keyes' reign of terror finally came to a dramatic end in 2012. For years he had been a ghost, slipping through the cracks, leaving behind only questions and heartbreak. But even the most cunning criminals make mistakes, and Keyes was no exception. It was a simple slip-up that brought him down. He was caught on camera using a debit card stolen from one of his victims. The footage was grainy, but it was enough. For someone who prided himself on meticulous planning and staying off the radar, it was almost laughable. A rookie mistake, right? The kind of error you'd expect from an amateur, not a so-called criminal mastermind. You'd think a man who orchestrated such elaborate crimes could handle something as basic as a piece of plastic. But in the end, it was that very arrogance, that belief in his own invincibility, that led to his downfall. The handcuffs clicked shut, and for the first time, Keyes was truly trapped. No more running, no more hiding. Authorities wasted no time. He was quickly extradited to Alaska, the place where his most notorious crimes had come to light. The journey was tense, with law enforcement on high alert, knowing the kind of man they were dealing with. Every step was calculated, every precaution taken, as they transported him across state lines to finally face justice. But Keyes had other plans. He wasn't about to let the justice system have the final word. He refused to cooperate, stonewalled investigators, and played mind games with everyone who tried to get answers. It was clear he relished the control, even from behind bars. And then, just as the trial was about to begin, he made his final move. In the dead of night, inside the cold, unforgiving walls of his jail cell, Keyes took his own life. He left behind a cryptic note, but no real answers. Some called it the coward's way out, a final act of defiance from a man who refused to be held accountable. Others saw it as a relief, an end to a nightmare that had haunted so many. The news spread quickly. Outside the courthouse, people gathered, some in shock, others in grim satisfaction. There were those who said good riddance, glad to see him gone, hoping his death would bring some measure of peace to the families he'd hurt. But for many, especially the families of his victims, it was a bitter pill to swallow. They had waited for justice, for answers, for the chance to look him in the eye and demand the truth. Instead, they were left with silence, disappointment, and a sense of being robbed all over again. The pain lingered, unresolved, as they tried to make sense of a story with no real ending. There was no trial, no testimony, no opportunity for the families to confront the man who had shattered their lives. The courtroom remained empty, the witness stand silent. Justice, in the traditional sense, was never served. The questions that haunted investigators and loved ones alike would remain unanswered, locked away forever with Keyes. For the families, there was no closure, no final chapter, no sense of resolution. They clung to memories, to photographs, to the hope that someday, somehow, they might find peace. But the wounds Keyes left behind ran deep, and the scars would last a lifetime. In the end, it felt as if Keyes was still calling the shots, even in death. He controlled the narrative, denied justice, and left a legacy of pain and unanswered questions. The twisted road he traveled may have ended, but for those left behind, the journey toward healing was only just beginning. Here's the thing that keeps me up at night. Keyes claimed to have killed for years, but only a handful of victims have been officially linked to him. So, where are the others? Are there more families out there still searching for answers? He left behind clues, cryptic notes, even maps with potential burial sites, but they're like pieces of a puzzle, scattered to the wind. It's a race against time to connect the dots before the trail goes cold. And that's the legacy of Israel Keyes, a chilling reminder that sometimes the monsters we create in our minds are nothing compared to the ones walking among us. Israel Keyes may be gone, but the fear he instilled lingers like a bad dream. He shattered the illusion of safety, proving that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places. It's enough to make you question everyone, even your own shadow. He forced us to confront a terrifying reality, that some people are simply born evil, driven by an insatiable darkness. There's no reasoning with them, no understanding their motives. Keyes' case serves as a chilling reminder to always be vigilant, to trust your gut, and to never take your safety for granted. Because the world can be a dark and dangerous place, and sometimes, the monsters are real.